All right. Welcome to the Jake Blanchard podcast. We're on episode number 77. My guest today is a 10th Planet Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under the famous Eddie Bravo. He's known for his detail-oriented teaching style of Jiu-Jitsu and is the owner of 10th Planet Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Portland, Oregon. I've had the pleasure to drop by over the years a few times. Excited to have him on the show. Phill Schwartz, welcome, my man.
Thank you so much, Jake. Appreciate it.
Dude, hey, you're out in Portland right now. Well, you've been in Portland for a while. How long have you been living in Portland?
I moved to Portland for college originally, and I graduated from Reed College, and which is known as kind of a somewhere between a school for really smart kids or a school for dirty hippies, or a school for smart dirty hippies. So you always get kind of a different, I've gotten both responses when I tell people I went there, that, saying, oh my God, that's a good school. Or also, you don't look like a dirty hippie. And so I've gotten both of those. But I moved up to Portland area for a school back in 2006. And that was before I even started training jiu-jitsu, shortly before. And then when I graduated in 2010, I moved back to Southern California, lived there for 2 years, and then I couldn't take it anymore. And so I moved back to Portland in 2013, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, man, I've got a love-hate relationship with Portland. I've been going there since 2005. I moved to Idaho in 2005, and got a lot of friends out in Portland. Used to go there 2-3 times a year. Go see concerts and at the Hawthorne or whatever's going on, hanging out with some friends. But last couple of years, man, between riots and lockdowns and what I would consider kind of an attack on small business, it must be hard to be running a jiu-jitsu school out there these days.
It has been hard. I've definitely thought about how the last year has somewhat made my fantasy of running an underground criminal enterprise less sexy. And so I've gotten to experience that, and it's been definitely a roller coaster, just in terms of what the state has been allowing us to do. And I mean, there was a time when we were totally closed down and guys were training out of garages, and, things were very fractured. And that was hard for us because, we're a community of several hundred people strong, and, we want to get together and we want to practice our art together, and we want to get together and, do other things too. And COVID, in Oregon made that difficult for a long time. But I am happy to say that we seem to have rebounded pretty strong, and the gym is doing well, and it's kind of as strong as ever. And what I noticed personally in my business and other businesses is that the businesses that found a way to evolve and survive through COVID are kind of booming right now, because people that were cooped up really want to get out and do stuff, and so I'm sure there's definitely a small and vocal group of people who are still really scared and, don't want anyone to do anything. But most people who want to get out and get after it are doing so. So that's great.
Yeah. And did, anytime that there's pressure on business and entrepreneurs, a lot of times the resourceful end up coming up with new businesses, new avenues, those types of things. Were you able to do any of that during COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I personally am not a huge fan of online jiu-jitsu instruction. I just find it to be very impersonal. I think that jiu-jitsu is kind of a physical, and jiu-jitsu is about being present. And so it's hard to be present when you're online. You don't feel the same connection. So I really honestly resisted becoming an online school, but then we did during COVID, and we had, we offered all the Zoom classes and all of that kind of stuff. And we really tried to get clever with that. But we also had a lot of other solutions for making sure people could train, including kind of creating what we called lifeboats, which were sort of small groups of training partners where, you know, you would have kind of like one dedicated group training together. And so that was kind of like a quarantine group. And so that also worked for a while, but I was personally resistant to just becoming, and just, you know, I mean, so many people, especially people who don't understand jiu-jitsu, who don't practice jiu-jitsu, kind of said to me, like, because I was, you know, I was a very vocal, I have a problem. I have a problem not kind of standing up and screaming. And so I was real vocal about the hardship on small businesses and the you know, the hypocrisy about allowing stores like Walmart to continue to open, but then closing all of the small businesses. And so we ended up mostly just surviving just because people were still motivated to train. And so they would find a way, whether that was online classes, training at home, or whether that was small group training, or whether that was training in the park. So kind of however people could get in, we were trying to make sure that there was an opportunity for them to get in and fit in. And then another thing that was hard was that, like, my other two kind of jiu-jitsu pursuits are running a tournament, several tournaments, which requires, you know, again, face-to-face contact sports. And then the other side is running jiu-jitsu travel camps. And so we had
Summit, right?
Nogi Summit, right? So
Yeah.
Nogi Summit is our camp company, and so we've done over eight or nine Nogi Summits in Portland, and then we've done them in Thailand, we've done them in Las Vegas, we've done them in Australia, we've done them in Arizona, we've done them in quite a few places, and they're always a really good time. And you know from experience that, you know, it's a really cool collection of passionate people getting together, and again, being present together, sharing their passion and their knowledge. And so we were unable to do that for several months. And you know, one of the things that it did give me time to do, which was kind of cool, was to go back through a lot of my video archives and kind of rewatch things that I'd filmed, because, you know, so oftentimes, and not just in jiu-jitsu, but just in life, you know, we film stuff because we think that we're going to somehow go back and watch it all, and we never do. I mean, I'm sure that everyone else has the same problem as me. Like,
dude, it's the same that you have on your phone. You have 14,000 pictures on your phone, and how often do you go through them and actually do something with them? Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I actually took some time to go back through and kind of edit some of that down into some sort of TV show type content. That maybe I'll pick that back up again at some point. But it was fun to work with the video editing and try to use videos from the good days when we were able to travel freely, and share that with people as a way of kind of showing a light at the end of the tunnel. So,
well, man, if you go back and look at all the different camps off of your website there, the Nogi Summit website, I mean, it's just a murderer's row of instructors and names and things like that. So like, there's something to be said about those immersion camps. I just got back from the Origin camp in Maine. Had an absolute blast just to be able to focus for several days, getting lots of different perspective and instructionals, like that speed to learning, like that just that focus on what you're doing, the relationships that you build. That's a pretty cool thing that you're building, man.
And the jiu-jitsu community is very much a global brotherhood, you know. And so I feel that whenever I walk into a gym, whether it's a 10th planet gym or not a 10th planet gym, anywhere in the world, like I feel like I can travel anywhere and I can walk into a jiu-jitsu gym and pretty much be, you know, welcomed as a friend, you know, and kind of treated again as a brother, even by people who don't necessarily know me or haven't met me before, and not necessarily even asking me to teach or to do anything, just kind of like, you're always welcome. And that's very much the vibe of our school too. Like we're very open to, you know, visitors coming in and training with us and getting some time on our mats. So it's definitely a nice thing to be part of that and to be able to feel like, you know, you can find friends and make friends anywhere in the world through jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I got to travel for a number of years. I was a traveling consultant. That's why I was able to drop into your school once or twice. And anytime that was close to a 10th Planet school, like 10th Planet West LA, dropped in Scott Epstein once upon a time, so welcoming, like, yeah, great environment. And by the way, and there's a lot of folks maybe listening to the podcast that don't understand 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu as a subculture of the greater Jiu-Jitsu world and community. So maybe just take a second to unpack that, because I think you guys have such an interesting subculture. You have an interesting way of approaching the art of Jiu-Jitsu. And I'd love to hear it in your words, how you would delineate 10th Planet from the rest of the Jiu-Jitsu world.
It's a good question. I was talking to someone about this the other day. I feel, this is my own personal opinion, I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I feel that 10th Planet, so first of all, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu is a no-gi Jiu-Jitsu style that was created by my teacher, Eddie Bravo. And Eddie will be up in Portland in 2 weeks for a seminar. So we're lucky to have him coming through for a seminar. Eddie was a really interesting practitioner, because he's always been someone who asks a lot of questions and who likes to see outside of the box. And the cool thing was that his instructor, Jean-Jacques Machado, who's from the famous Machado family Jiu-Jitsu, Jean-Jacques was born with not as many fingers as he should have on his left hand.
He's got 3, right?
I think he has 3
yeah.
on his hand. And so from the very beginning in his jiu-jitsu, Jean-Jacques had to play an adaptive style of jiu-jitsu that wasn't really necessarily the canonical jiu-jitsu, Gracie jiu-jitsu. That was, he couldn't use grips the same way. So he developed a style of jiu-jitsu that was his own, and that he felt worked really well, whether it was gi or no gi. And so I think that, when Jean-Jacques had this student, Eddie, who was very much going his own way and trying to do things his own way, I think Eddie was given the leeway to explore and to experiment, whereas a lot of schools might have said, like, no, do this our way, do this the traditional way, do this the way we want you to do it. And Jean-Jacques was kind of always tickled by the fact that Eddie was coming up and finishing guys with new variations, or his own variations, or his own style. And so I think it's really cool that in the lineage of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, we have 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu is just another lineage of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Like, there's no way to trace our lineage without also seeing the Machado lineage and under Hickson and under the other Gracies. But where 10th Planet diverges is, for one, we focus exclusively on no-gi, and on the techniques that work for no-gi, which are purely anatomical based techniques. So we can only work with your anatomy. We cannot work with your clothing or your grips. The other part of it is, I think 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu to some people looks quite complicated. And sometimes people, even 10th Planet schools themselves, don't always focus enough on the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu. And so I think that there's a place for all of the styles of jiu-jitsu, but I would say, honestly, I would love it if people only came to 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu after having achieved a blue belt in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Like, I see 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu as a graduate study of jiu-jitsu. And so in my school, when we teach, what we teach in our fundamentals program is we teach essentially classical jiu-jitsu. I mean, we don't teach a ton of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu in our fundamentals. We teach fundamental jiu-jitsu in our fundamentals. And once the students graduate from that, then we start to incorporate more of the rubber guard, the lockdown, the truck, the spider web, and the other positions that are very 10th Planet focused. The other thing about 10th Planet is that it's a living document. It's a living system. And so every single month, every day, Eddie is taking, he's taking what is working at the top level, and he's incorporating that into the system, and anything we find that's not working, we exclude from the system. So the system is growing and developing to the point where there's a lot of moves that you might read a 10th Planet instructional book from 10 years ago, and some of those techniques we might be, yep, exactly. Some of those techniques, advanced rubber guard. Some of that stuff we might still be doing every day, and some of that stuff we might not be doing every day because the game has evolved, you know?
Yeah.
And something that I think that, you know, I think we all kind of understand this, but imagine somebody who got their black belt in 1995, right? And so they're a legitimate black belt in traditional jiu-jitsu, but if they took 10 or 15 years off and they come back into the sport, you know, having all the same skills and fitness that they had back then, they're going to be lost in what modern jiu-jitsu looks like, because the sport has evolved so much and continues to evolve, you know? And this is not just true for no-gi jiu-jitsu, it's true for gi jiu-jitsu as well. Like everything that Keenan Cornelius has done, and the Meow brothers have done, and there's just so much evolution of jiu-jitsu. And now we're looking at like Mikey Musumeci, and there's just a lot of evolution. And so 10th Planet specifically tries to stay on top of that evolution and tries to acknowledge it instead of sticking more to a dogmatic viewpoint of what jiu-jitsu is and how it should be taught.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such an interesting point that you made, that if you were to step away for 10 to 15 years, I mean, like, so, you know, for instance, if you looked at another sport, if you looked at football or basketball, I'm sure if you stepped away for 10 years and came back, there would be some differences in the game, some differences in strategy, but fundamentally the game is the same. But you know, I'm starting to going down this vein of thinking that you just brought up. There are like a lot of the mechanics are so nuanced in jiu-jitsu, an angle here, an angle there, the way that you set this thing up that completely can nullify defenses or offenses so quickly. So that constant focus on iteration, the constant focus on, and then dissemination of that information. I mean, 10th Planet has what, 100 schools?
Over 100 schools.
Over 100 schools, and it's worldwide, right? So how do you get that technique all the way out? Is it internally? Do you guys have like internal communications between the schools, or is there kind of a unification around the techniques that are taught on a weekly basis? Like how does that work?
So you actually hit on something that's really important that keeps us different. And so when you think about like, let's take the formerly world famous Danaher Death Squad for a second. When you take a group of guys that are all really high level and you put them all in the same room, you get a certain kind of progression, right? Everybody gets good at the same things, but you don't necessarily get a lot of innovation. It's not necessarily about innovation as much as it is about perfection and kind of iron sharpens iron kind of mentality. We see the same thing with like Atos Jiu-Jitsu right now. Like everybody that comes out of Atos has a similar skill set. Like they all can wrestle, they all have certain finishes, but we're not seeing necessarily the next epiphany of the game coming out of Atos Jiu-Jitsu right now.
Yeah.
And so the difference between that and 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu is that 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu is very, very spread out. And all of our best guys are all spread out running different schools in different geographies. And so one of the things that's really special about Eddie and his philosophy is that instead of being very top down, Eddie, of course, shares with us all of his new revelations, but he also makes space for us to share with him our revelations. And so imagine instead of having one large, laboratory environment, you have many, many, many different experiments going on all around the world. And so we all communicate with each other and we say, hey, here's something that we came up with, or one of my guys came up with, or here's an innovation from Finland. And now here's an innovation from Australia. And here's an innovation from Asia. And here's an innovation from Kansas. And here's an innovation from Florida, so we're all kind of cross communicating and sharing and trying to replicate each other's work in kind of a scientific way. But we're not all in a huge concentration the way that some gyms are.
Yeah. And there's I would imagine then there's kind of a feeling of responsibility then. Like, do you feel responsible of innovating on jujitsu and bringing that back, or is it something that kind of happens naturally?
I love to innovate. I think the innovation is great. But right now, I'm actually in a focus on simplification over innovation. And so I'm in a stage of reduction is what I'm calling it. So I'm attempting to reduce down jujitsu as much as possible to as few ideas as possible. And kind of a cliche that I use is I talk about having a jujitsu cheat sheet, meaning that, imagine you're going into a match, you can only take with you the things that you can write down on your arm, So, what we don't have a lot of use for is an encyclopedia of jujitsu. You want your coach to be the encyclopedia of jujitsu, right? So you want to be able to go to your coach and say, Keith, I was in an arm bar and I thought I was going to finish, but then the guy escaped this way. What can I do better? And then your coach says, okay, here's the answer to your problem. But for yourself, what you want is you don't want to have to flip. You don't have time in the middle of a match to flip to page 765 and say like, okay, what's the unique answer to this unique problem? What you want are basic fundamental principles that are going to keep you in the right place and get you the right result. Like I think Chris Howder kind of put out like his 5 rules of jiu-jitsu, which is like, be the guy on top. If you're the guy on bottom, basically like have a good guard, but don't stay on the bottom, become the guy on top, and like be on top, basically.
Yeah.
But I think that's those, I think those kinds of reductive rules are really helpful, because instead of saying to someone like, okay, I want you to do the scissor sweep. So you're going to take your bottom leg and you're going to find the floor and the knee, and your top leg is going to become, a lever, and you're going to pendulum the guy over or whatever. Like, instead of all of that, you can just say, hey, get on top. You want to be on top. And of course, in the beginning, that's not very helpful, because you say, well, how do I get on top? How do I move my body? What do I do? But once you know jiu-jitsu and once you're more familiar with it, then I think that kind of reduction is more helpful. So for black belt level people, I think that trying to reduce down all of the jargon into concepts is really important.
Well, and as I'm listening to you talk here, I mean, I'm thinking about the game blackjack, right? The ultimate objective of blackjack is 21. So if you're trying to get 21 or be on top, whatever hand you get dealt, you've just got to make decisions. The faster you can make the decision, the quicker you're within the flow. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but like, at least that, I'm going to hit, I'm going to stand, I'm going to hit, I'm going to stay. Like, you know what I mean? So I kind of feel like maybe there's an analogy there.
Have you ever heard of? Yeah, have you ever heard of the Ooda Loop?
Yeah, absolutely. It's typically used for military shooting, or like going in and I'm gonna observe. Oh man, I can't remember.
Yeah, you're there though. It's observe, orient, decide, and act.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was developed by an Air Force captain or colonel, and basically what he said was that in a aerial combat, the pilot that makes the faster decision wins like a huge amount of the time. And so of course, the decision itself is important, but the paralysis of being unable to decide your next move is what really kills you, because it allows the other pilot to get behind you and then get you into a kill shot. So in jiu-jitsu, we see the same thing. You are much better off making a faster, decent decision than you are making a slow, perfect decision in jiu-jitsu. And so what we try to reduce is the amount of thinking that has to go in to the movement. So I'll give you a perfect example. when you see your opponent level change on you and begin to shoot in on a takedown, right? Your first observation is, oh, he's level changing, he's shooting a takedown. Your orientation is, how does this apply to me? What does this mean to me? Well, he's shooting on me, so I need to move my hips backwards and I need to get a crossface in. Your decision is to sprawl and your action is to make the sprawl happen, right? If you take too much time deciding or orienting or even observing, you're going to be on your ass, right? What we want people to do is to see the shot coming and to sprawl immediately without having to think about it too much. A lot of times we call that muscle memory, but what we're really saying is that you've seen the situation so much that you can go from observation to action and cruise through orientation and decision very, very fast. The more decisions that I give you, the more options that I give you, the longer you're going to pause and try to think which one of these crossroads is the right crossroads. If I tell you every time they shoot on you like this, you sprawl like this, and that you know that, like the 21 example, like every time you get 17, you're going to do this. Every time you get 11, you're going to do this. Like, there's no question about it. It's just an observation straight to an action. Like, oh, I have 11, I'm doubling down. Oh, he's shooting on me, I'm sprawling, right? And circling. So in my coaching, we want to get to faster decisions and faster actions, because that translates to better positional dominance faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're, I want to talk a little bit about coaching too, because I'm curious, as you're taking your jujitsu right now and you're kind of pushing it through a strainer, and distilling down the simplification. Does it make its way into coaching competitors first, or does it make way into coaching classes first, or do you look at those things as the same?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because I taught a fundamentals class this morning. I normally don't teach the fundamentals class, but one of my coaches was out, and so I covered for him. And in this class, I got to experiment with a thought that I've had recently, which is, can I teach you some fundamental jujitsu movements, body movements, and then can I make those apply to more than one scenario, right? So I was teaching a leg lock, but I taught it by teaching first a guillotine and then an arm bar. And then I used some of the upper body mechanics of the guillotine and some of the lower body mechanics of the arm bar, and I put those two together into a straight ankle lock. Okay. And so, yep. Sure. So we have our guillotine and then we have our arm bar and our lower body, right? And so this is an experimental form of coaching that I'm working on, which is if you've ever played like an RPG or like a video game, there's always a skill tree, right? And so one of the problems with our jiu-jitsu coaching, as I see it in the modern world, is that we teach people like every move is an island. So we say there's an arm bar, here's the arm bar. There's a knee bar, here's the knee bar. There's a kimura, here's the kimura. There's an omoplata, here's the omoplata. And then the student looks at all those things and they see islands. And then it takes you a lot of time to explain how to turn kimura into an omoplata, or how to ride that up into an arm bar, you know what I mean? Or how to transition, you know, so it takes a lot. Now we have to, after we're like, okay, you barely know the arm bar, but now we're going to teach you the Americana or whatever. What I've been trying to focus on is, where are the core movements that are common to all movements inside of these techniques? So an arm bar, it's isolation of the joint with a fulcrum and then extension, right? Tell me how an arm bar is different than a knee bar. It's not different at all.
Just above the hips or below the hips, right?
Right. It's exactly the same.
Unless you got some weird ass arms, but generally they're above the hips.
Right. So it's mostly the same, right? Yeah. So in my mind, the arm bar is, or the knee bar is up the skill tree from the arm bar. If I take you for a year and I only show you the arm bar, you know what I'm saying? And I get you to become a ninja of the arm bar. And then after a year of that, I show you the knee bar. Are you going to be better at the knee bar for having learned the arm bar? That's my hypothesis, is yes. That we can teach you the arm bar. We can teach you how to isolate with your legs, how to engage your hips, and how to extend with your upper body in a way that's going to connect for you, instead of presenting those like they're two separate ideas in two separate positions, two separate techniques.
And to your point, I mean, the focusing on the branches, you're really teaching them the transition, the positional awareness of getting to it, but the mechanics should be fairly strong once you get there.
Right. So that at the end of the day, like if you've learned all of the base techniques, then all that's left for you to learn are transitions, movement and transitions, control, and then escapes.
So how, I've got a couple questions here. I think the first one is I just wanted to give a shout out to somebody who I admire that trains out of your school, Amanda Lowen. Is that how you say her last name?
Yeah, Amanda Lowen. We love her.
Yeah, she caught my eye after that match with Jessica I that she won, that OT match, and then I know she went on a crazy win streak there for a while in Sub Underground and whatnot. But what an absolute savage! I believe she one of Oregon's like first female black belts, or maybe
she's Oregon's first female black belt, under Professor Matt Thornton at Straight Blast HQ.
Yeah.
And she's also still the reigning submission underground women's champion. She's undefeated in like 9 or 10 performances there now.
Wow.
And yeah, talk about someone that has an incredible armbar, is her right there. And she's also like incredibly difficult to submit. And she's just an awesome practitioner. She's a cool person.
Yeah, I'm a fan. Follow her on social, and I knew. Did she teach out at your school or train out there, or how does that work? I mean, I know she's SBU.
Oh yeah, she's a full-time coach for us. She's teaching. She teaches our women's program. She teaches our kids program. She teaches a morning class and also a fundamentals class. So she teaches more classes a day than I do.
I love it. Hey, let me pivot a little bit. I want to ask you a question. What the hell would you be doing in life if it wasn't for jujitsu? Like, what were you doing before jujitsu? And then I'd love to hear your origin story of how you stumbled into to jujitsu. Did you start with Eddie? Did you start somewhere else? Like, help me understand that path.
Yeah, so I started. I actually did start with Eddie in Southern California, and I've trained at other gyms along the way when I was not in California. But prior to jiu-jitsu, so okay, I have a kind of a bad habit of turning my passion into my profession. So when I was in high school, I was obsessed with music, and I got into the music industry for a few years, and I was managing bands and working in studios, and I got a job at a music management company that was managing some really big bands. And I was just like an intern, but I was like having a really good time working with those guys.
Was it out of Portland?
No, that was in Los Angeles.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And so like, I mean, I'm talking like really big bands. Like these guys manage the Foo Fighters, you know,
and
like really big bands. So like, that was always like really interesting. Cause like sometimes you're in the office and then Dave Grohl walks in or Jack Black walks in and you're like, oh, that's Jack Black. Or like, I got to watch the Celtics Lakers basketball series finals with the Beastie Boys, you know, like just like, and of course like it was like LA, it was like West Coast versus East Coast kind of thing. So some crazy experiences like that growing up. But eventually I realized that I didn't really see a lot of joy in the lives of those folks. And in college, I thought I was going to go to medical school, but I didn't enjoy organic chemistry. And
that's usually the one that gets people either in or out, right?
It's terrible. It's so bad. It was so bad. And also they scheduled me for like a 7 a.m. class, and I was like a partier in college, and I just like couldn't handle that. I just wasn't ready for it. And so then I switched to pre-law. And after I graduated, I worked for several law firms, including I worked for a cannabis law firm, doing, kind of new edge cannabis law, and that was in California. And then when I moved back to Oregon, I actually started my own consulting firm, and I was doing cannabis consulting with a partner, and we ran that company for about 5 or 6 years, until we were kind of done with it. And so, to be honest,
Just thinking about a cannabis law firms, man. I don't think I'm really like back in the day. Could have been if you would have stayed with the law, it could have been Snoop and Schwartz.
yeah, seriously, like I have some friends, I have some really good friends actually who have done some huge things in the cannabis world. And it's kind of like one of those things where, like, if I had gone to law school and stayed on that path with them, like, we would have all been, partners. And
Yeah,
I have no issue with stepping away from that, because I was
yeah,
way more passionate about jujitsu. And I actually I took all my money out of the consulting company and put it into my gym, to kind of get the gym off the ground. And so, anyways, but recently, and especially during COVID, I thought about, like, what would I do if I had to start over, or what would I do if I wasn't doing jujitsu right now? And the thing that interests me the most, it's kind of weird, but I like, uh I kind of could see myself being an electrician, or like a contractor, like a house builder. Like, I love putting the house together. We just finished remodeling our house, and, like, I did a bunch of the electrical work, and I just really enjoy problem solving, and I've always wanted, like, dynamic problems to solve. And so, like, I would love a job where I, could solve a different problem every day, and I kind of feel like construction is like that a little bit. And so I could definitely see myself as, like, either a house builder or just as an electrician, just kind of like putting circuits together. I just think it's really interesting.
yeah. And then did you like now that you're running, hey, it's a business, like
Oh yeah.
running a gym's a business. Like, do you gravitate toward the business aspects of it, or is business a byproduct of the jujitsu?
So that's actually really funny, because I've talked to some friends of mine who also, because I do gravitate towards the business side of things, and I see that as a different art that you have to master on top of the jujitsu. And so it's funny, because some other friends of mine that are black belts that are also running their own gyms, we've talked about kind of how to invest in new startups and new gyms. And one of them said to me, essentially, his perspective is, it's a lot easier to teach a business person jujitsu than it is to teach a jujitsu person business. And
Mm,
so unfortunately, um, there's a lot of really talented jujitsu athletes out there that do not have a knack for the business side, and so they're not really successful as jujitsu artists as they should be. And then there's a lot of people out there who maybe aren't the greatest practitioners, but they're a little bit more savvy on the business side, and so they're having a lot of success. And so, I probably fall into the latter category.
yeah.
like like as as decent as my jujitsu is, I'm probably, you know I'm not the best jujitsu practitioner in the world, but I do understand how to run a business, and I do have a good knack for kind of building a community and keeping things engaging and interesting. And to me, what I enjoy most is the teaching aspect of it. So that would be another alternative career. I could happily go teach, like, high school science or math or something like that, and be pretty engaged, I think.
That's pretty awesome, man. That's such an interesting question to ponder. I'd struggle to be able to answer it for myself. It's
Yeah.
I'm a business consultant. That's what I do for a living. But taking a step back, I'm like, what would I do otherwise? I'd probably say I'd want to teach jujitsu, but
Yeah.
I got a long road to hoe. There's a whole skill set you have to build first to do that. Hey, another
Well,
question. Oh, go ahead.
the thing was that jujitsu started as my hobby, and it was just something that I was passionate about. And when I have students come to me, usually around blue belt level, and they say, like, "Coach, I see what you get to do, and I love jujitsu so much, and I just want to do the jujitsu. I want to live the jujitsu life, and like I see how you get to fly over here and teach a seminar, and fly over there and teach a seminar, and then you're taking some students to compete over here. You're doing this, you're doing that, you're competing yourself, and like I just want to do this, you know. And the short answer is that's great, but keep investing in yourself, because there's no shortcuts, and nobody is going to want to learn from you if you yourself don't have the answers and you haven't put your own time in. So the short answer is become legit as possible yourself, and then you'll have a road to helping others. But if your goal is to try and cut corners, you're never going to make it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. How are you keeping investing in yourself these days besides running some electrical work around the house?
Well, my first son is being born in the next 6 weeks.
Congrats,
so that's a big life change coming, and I've just been kind of preparing myself for that. I have some injuries that have been nagging me for years that I've been kind of ignoring, but as I approach my mid-30s, I'm starting to feel more of a need to kind of invest in my own health and well-being. And so just kind of starting to tune up my PT and my self-care routine is becoming more and more important. I'm a big fan of meditation and of those kinds of practices as well. So I definitely like to look inward as much as I like to look outward.
Yeah, super important. Super important as well. Just checking in with yourself, sitting beside yourself, as I like to say. Just, hey, am I getting after it or not? I got one more big question for you, and it goes back to jujitsu and it goes back to tournaments. You were talking about taking people out to competing yourself. You've probably competed under a lot of different tournaments and rule sets, and coached athletes under those tournaments and rule sets. You can't say EBI. What's your favorite rule set that's out there?
I can't say EBI.
You can't say EBI.
Okay,
I was assuming that EBI would be.
how about my own tournament, Shugyo?
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Okay, Shugyo is my favorite rule set. The Shugyo tournament that we started, it's a no time limit submission only tournament. So every single match is guaranteed to end in a submission. The first season that we ran had 13 matches ending in 13 submissions. So our tagline is kind of submission guaranteed. There's a lot of challenges with running a no time limit bracket, but the biggest thing about it is that it's the most satisfying to the athletes. Every other tournament format has an opportunity for someone to get cheated by the rules, meaning if you get a referee decision against you, it wasn't a clean win. Or if you lose by points, but the guy didn't submit you, then you don't think it was a clean win. Or like
or you get disqualified for reaping when you barely put your foot on a hip.
Right. Or you win by an advantage point. You know what I mean? And people act like they act like they did something really tremendous, but they really just won by an advantage point. A lot of people feel that for all the benefits of EBI, the one deficit of EBI is that someone can essentially, stall out the first regulation period and then get started on your back and choke you and then win the match that way. In Shugyo, there's none of that. So you have to achieve a position and submit your opponent. And we've had a match that went on for our longest match to date was 72 minutes long. And so two black belts fought nonstop for 72 minutes until one of them tapped the other one.
That's outstanding. It's like the old days of Valley Tudo and stuff. Like that's the getting in there and just go until it's done.
Yep. So if you or the viewer hasn't had a chance to watch, all of our episodes are on YouTube. It's SHUGYO, Shugyo Invitational. It's really fun. And what we did was we tried to make it a little bit like a reality TV show. So don't force you to watch the full match. What we do is we show you interviews with the athletes leading up to the match, and then we show you the match itself in like a highlight format, and then afterwards we show you the athletes breaking down the match and kind of giving you their thoughts. And you have to I have to apologize for the audio quality. It's a little bit shoddy just because it was our first production.
Yeah.
But we are looking. COVID kind of took us off rails for that for season 2, but we're working on putting a season 2 together right now, and hopefully that'll be dropping in the future.
That's awesome. And season 2, probably, are you guys hosting that in Portland, or is it somewhere else, or what?
So part of the thing about the tournament is that it's a big secret. So I don't tell anyone anything about it. I don't tell people the weight class or anything. And what we do is we film it all on one weekend, and then everyone goes home and no one talks about the winners, and we don't there's no live stream or anything like that. And then we edit it down into a TV format. So it's like the Ultimate Fighter, where everyone's kind of sworn to secrecy. And then every week we drop an episode, and the episodes come out, and you kind of learn more about how it went. So what we do is we're trying to give everybody the best of all worlds, where when the athletes are actually competing, there's no pressure on them because they have a no time limit format. So they know they have enough time to get it done if that's what's going to happen. But the audience doesn't want to watch that. So then what we do is we edit it down for the audience so that they get a good experience. And then we add sponsor information so the sponsors get representation. So we try to give the athletes and the audience the best of both experiences.
Well, I got a season to get caught up on then. I didn't realize that was a whole ecosystem or a thing that you were running, man. I'm glad you told me that.
Yeah, please share with your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, also, I got to ask you, what's on your shirt?
Oh, this is a shirt I've made that says "Don't spaz on me," and it's
like
a little,
"Don't tread on me," the snake.
Yeah, like yep,
Yeah.
It's a Jiu-Jitsu Gadsden flag, and that's available on our gear website for 10th Planet Portland is it's nwnogi.com, northwestnogi.com. And you can find all of our stuff there. You can find rash guards, hats, t-shirts, some other cool stuff, this design. And I like to make t-shirts that aren't just 10th Planet-y, so that you can, people can feel like they can rock them too. So
hell yeah. Hey, you've already dropped quite a bit of knowledge here on the podcast, and as we're wrapping up, I'm pulling some major threads here. Keep investing in yourself. I love the idea that you're going through a cycle of simplification with jujitsu and really getting close to what's most important to you, the way you teach, the style, etc. Drop some black belt knowledge here, man. I mean, there's definitely quite a few people who do jujitsu that listen to this podcast. Would love to hear just a reflection of what it's been like since you've been doing this crazy sport, and any advice out there.
Sure. So I've been practicing jiu-jitsu for just about 14 years now. So I'm almost to my first stripe on my black belt. And I think that this is kind of a cliche that people have heard before, but it's like in jiu-jitsu and martial arts, it is a sport of longevity. And so like what Bruce Lee said was that long-term consistency trumps short-term intensity every time. And one of my mentors in jiu-jitsu and a friend, Kai Otera, who's a multiple time world champion, and he and I have spent a lot of time together, and we've traveled the world together teaching. And something that he shared with me that I think is really important to pass forward, which is that Caio was an anomaly because in Brazil, he was able to get his black belt in 4 years of training, which is pretty much unheard of. But what he was doing was he was working 10 hours a day, 7 days a week in jiu-jitsu. And most people were doing 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. So most guys were getting 10 hours a week, and he was getting 10 hours a day. And that was what really sped him up. And a lot of people look at the end goal of black belt and they say, I want to get there, and I want to get there as fast as possible. How do I reach this achievement as fast as possible? And what Caio said was that he wishes he had not been the kind of person who raced to the finish line, because what he did was he achieved his black belt in 4 years, but he also acquired lifelong injuries that he can't get rid of now. And so if you look at someone who achieves black belt, whether they do it in 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, however long it takes you to get to your black belt, the point is that you can continue to practice. We will all see a lot of people along the way who make it to whatever belt they make it to, and then they have to stop training for whatever reason, you know? And so if you look at someone who made it to black belt in 5 years, but then they quit and they can't practice anymore, and then you made it to black belt in 10 years, but yet 15 years on, 20 years on, you're still practicing, who's really the winner? You know what I mean? Who's really the one that made it further? So the goal is longevity in the sport, not speed to achievement. And so when you're practicing, try to practice for longevity, whether that means tapping early and tapping often instead of, you know, hulking out of moves, whether that means getting your yoga and your self-care routine on point, whatever it means, take the path that leads you to longevity, not the path that leads you to the fastest results.
Absolutely. My jujitsu professor, Keith Owen, he harps on that as well. It's just trying to stay injury free, taking care of your partners, taking care of yourself, learning the technique, letting it sink in, and not spazzing out. Don't spaz out on me. Right.
We'll send Keith one of these shirts too.
Absolutely. Hey man, shout out a couple socials, things, websites, things like that. And then let's wrap up, man.
Okay, sure. Thanks guys so much for having me again. You can find me on Instagram at Phill Schwartz 10P. My projects are 10th Planet Portland, the Shugyo Invitational, and No-Gi Summit. All of those are on Instagram as well. Check out season 1 of Shugyo Invitational on YouTube. It's absolutely free and it's really exciting jiu-jitsu, really beautiful jiu-jitsu, no time limit. And then keep an eye out for upcoming No-Gi Summit activities. And we're looking to put together a jiu-jitsu snowboarding camp that will be called the Snow-Gi Summit. So keep an eye out for that too, if you want to do jiu-jitsu and snowboarding.
I'm there. I'm signing up right now. I will be there. Dude, Phill, it was great to meet you a couple years ago at your school in Portland. I appreciate you carving out some time with me today, sharing your knowledge, your experience, your journey, and looking forward to the next time we can connect, my man. Thanks for dropping by the podcast.
Thank you, Jake. We'll see you soon.
All right, cheers.